Welcome back to Barber Coach TV, and today we are bringing you a drop fade tutorial and showing how to create this style that you can see on screen. Always remember to have an effective consultation with your client before starting, finding out exactly how he likes to wear his hair, how he's going to be styling it and how he wants it to sit. And also in this consultation you want to be checking for any skin conditions and anything that could potentially cause him or yourself harm throughout the haircut. Now, because our customer's hair is really long and very thick and very overgrown, we're wetting it first, combing it through. This will then give the hair better tension and it will allow it to sit more naturally, allowing us to cut the hair more accurately. I'm still going to be using my 5 roads method, but I'm going to be starting at the back with this hairstyle because his hair is already overgrown and quite long. Starting from the front would mean that we're picking up a lot of hair in each section, which can make it more uncomfortable for the customer and it'll make the cutting less accurate. So by starting at the back, we can pick more direct sections. There will be less hair in each section, making the haircut more accurate, and it'll be more comfortable for the customer because we're not dragging more hair through the comb. Now, I'm only using a wide tooth comb. It's technically a small clipper comb, and I tend to use this comb for most of my cutting because I find that with thick men's hair, it flows through the hair more easily. I can still get good tension on the sections, but I'm used to using this comb. You might find you might want to use a smaller straight comb, smaller tooth comb to get better tension on your sections. But I like to use this because I find that I can flow through the hair more easily when I'm freestyling or scissor over combing. So we've started on road 1, just in front of the crown, at the back of the apex of the head. We pulled the first section and we've cut in the desired length. Now it's important to include your customer in the consultation and finding out what length he wants to cut it down to. If he's not sure, then it's important to take a little bit off first, double check with him and gradually reducing the length once the client is happy, rather than just guessing and potentially taking off too much at the start. But I have gauged my length based on the idea of wanting to create more texture on top. So to create more texture, the hair does have to be a little bit shorter, but we're gradually going to let it get longer as it flows to the front with a lot more texture sitting behind. So I'm cutting the sections shorter at the back and then I'm pulling the sections from the apex. So basically the apex is the raised point at the middle of the top of the head. As I'm getting to the apex, I'm then pulling my sections back towards my guideline. So the first guideline I pull in front of the crown, I cut shorter and I'm looking at the hair that I'm leaving behind. It's not what we cut away that's important, it's what we leave behind. So let's have a look at the hair we're about to cut, have a look at the hair we're about to leave behind, and we need to gauge, is this going to be long enough or is this going to be short enough? I'm now carefully picking my sections and just bringing the sections back towards the apex guideline. And the whole point of this is so that the hair gradually gets longer from your apex then towards the front. So the front section that sits down will be longer than the section behind, and then it'll gradually get shorter as it comes back to our first guideline that was cut just in front of the crown. This is a nice easy method for picking sections. I'm holding the section that I've originally cut back, drawing the comb across the hair and then just scooping. So as I draw the comb across, that then selects the section and I can scoop up and catch with my fingers, connect it to the section behind then to find the guideline. Before completing road 1, I'm just going to cross-check all the sections that I've just cut, working through the hair, picking a section at a time, just making sure that it's all even, parallel and in shape. And this will allow us then to complete road 1 accurately before moving on to road 2. Now that I'm happy with the length of the hair throughout road 1, I'm just combing the hair through to make sure it's all sitting even, lifting up the last and final section of the fringe, connecting that to the sections behind, making sure that it's completely accurate and that it's sitting in the right position for the customer. And then I'll be moving on to road 2 and I'll be connecting all sections from road 2 to road 1, but still following the method of starting at the back and working forward. Because we created a nice wide section for road 1 by starting at the back and working forward, when we do roads 2 and 3, we can almost complete the whole section of the top in just 3 sections. Roads 4 and 5 then we can allow to stay a bit heavier, and I will cut them scissor over comb as they sit into their position on the sides of the head. So in this case, roads 1, 2 and 3 will almost be enough to complete the length of the top. As I'm finding my section of road 2, I'm connecting it to what I've already cut in road 1. I'm pulling the sections out diagonally, moving the hair into position and then connecting that guideline throughout road 1 and into road 2. I'm angling the hair down slightly as I pull it out diagonally so that the layer will fall naturally then into roads 4 and 5, but won't be too long and too heavy. And just like road 1, I'll be repeating this process from the back all the way to the front and just making sure that I'm connecting the sections evenly from road 1 to road 2. And continuing to over direct the sections from in front of the apex back to the guideline on the apex, ensuring that the length gets longer towards the front. Every couple of sections I'll cross-check by just working back through the sections behind and across to the sections beside, just to make sure that everything's connecting and that everything has been cut evenly before completing the whole section. Once you're happy with the length and the shape of road 2, and that everything is flowing and connecting accurately to road 1, we can then move on to road 3. In case anybody's wondering, I'm using a quartered steel scissors. It's a 6-inch scissors, and I'm club cutting the hair first as I cut it into shape to remove the length, and I will point cut at the end. Because I'm right-handed, rather than awkwardly trying to comb out from road 1 into road 3 to the left, which is quite uncomfortable, I'm working from road 5 on the side of the head through road 3 and into road 1 to pick my sections. I'm still picking the same sections, they're still clean and even, but I'm finding that that angle is easier for me being right-handed. And just like steps 1 and 2, I'm working from the back to the front, and with step 3 being the left-hand side of the head, I'm pulling the sections out diagonally to the left, making sure that they're flowing into road 1, and again angling them down slightly towards road 5 so that it layers into the blend. Now that roads 1, 2 and 3 have been completed, the length has been cut into shape. We're happy with the desired length, the customer is happy. Now I'm able to go through the hair and point cut to create texture, to remove any excess weight and start building some character in the hairstyle and allowing that style to come to life. I'm still following the process of starting at the back, picking the sections and working forward. Again, it allows us to pick easier sections. We can hold more accurate sections and be in control then of exactly what we're cutting, rather than accidentally connecting too many sections together. I do generally start the front with shorter hairstyles, but with longer, more layered hairstyles, I'd rather start at the back and work forward. So I'm going to repeat this process through rows 1, 2 and 3, pull in the same sections as I did at the start, but point cutting into the hair rather than club cutting. hope you noticed that I was separating the hair behind from the fringe. I didn't actually point cut the fringe back in the sections above. I'm point cutting the fringe forward, so I'm allowing the fringe to fall to where it would fall naturally. I'm cutting it forward into position. This will give us a more accurate idea of where the hair is going to sit, and we can see exactly the shape we're cutting it into. Sometimes, depending on the type of hairline that the customer has, by lifting it back into the sections above, just because it's even as you lift it up, it doesn't mean it'll be even as it falls down because of the type of hairline. If the hairline's not even, then the hair won't sit even as it falls forward. So sometimes separating the fringe from the top and cutting the fringe forward into position will allow us to create a more accurate shape and will allow the hair to sit more naturally and more even forward. I'm now separating rows 1, 2 and 3 from rows 4, moving the fringe aside, and I'll be cutting this row in scissor over comb. This will allow me to see exactly where the hair is going to sit after it's being cut, and will allow me to blend it in and to remove any excess bulk as I'm working through it, allowing me to see the hair in its finished state and see exactly how it sits. And I prefer to cut like this as it allows me to cut the hair into the position of the style. Sometimes cutting rows 4 and 5 into the top and lifting them out horizontally or diagonally is good for removing bulk, but when it comes to seeing how the hair wants to sit naturally, we need to allow it to sit into position and then cut it into position. I'm now refining the fringe. I'm point cutting the ends to keep a textured finish, and I'm connecting the fringe to rows 4 and 5 so that the hair flows evenly throughout the blend and into the fringe. Just like on row 4 now, I can separate the fringe from the side. I'll be combing rows 5 down to blend it in and to remove any excess bulk and length. And I'll be doing this by repeating the scissor over comb method. And if you're not familiar with scissor over comb, you pick a section of hair with the scissors with the mouth closed. You come then behind the scissors underneath, lifting the hair, scooping it into the comb, and then you follow the comb with the scissors, keeping the comb square and parallel to the head. And as the comb lifts through the hair, you follow with the scissors, removing the hair, using a reciprocating motion with the scissors. I'm now cutting the crown and the back of the head separately from the top and the sides. The crown and the rear area of the head sit differently to the top and the sides. The hair that sits below the crown will fall differently to the hair in front of the crown. So I've kept these sections separate. So now that I've completed the top and I'm happy with the sides, I'm just flowing through the crown area, lifting the sections out diagonally and allowing them to connect slightly to the top, not overcutting them, because if we cut the hair too short in the crown, it'll just stick up out of control. I'm lifting the hair out horizontally towards the back of the head and just creating a layer that flows through the back, through the crown and into the top, allowing the hair to sit tightly in the crown. I'm now going to use a more advanced technique for creating texture. Now, if you are a newer barber, I wouldn't recommend doing this because a lot could go wrong if you do it wrong. But the trick with this technique is to comb the hair forward and to point in directly against the grain or against the direction of growth. Come into the hair with the mouth open and to cut as you pull in away. And this creates a nice surface texture, giving deep character on the surface of the hair. You have to make sure that you are cutting with the direction of growth and not across. If you cut across, you'll create lines and remove too much length and it will ruin the surface of the hair. I'm now moving on to the thinning scissors, or texturizing scissors as some would prefer to call them. And all I'm going to do is thin the end slightly, just nibble the last sort of 5 to 10% of the hair, and this allows the texture that we've created by point cutting to separate that little bit more, making it look deeper and more prominent. So to create the best texture, we do it in 3 stages. So initially we point cut the ends. I've then done a surface freehand texturing method, and now I'm using the thinning scissors at the end to really separate the ends and separate the points that we created with the other 2 methods to really make that texture stand out. Before moving on to the clipper work, I'm just going to flow through the blend and the rear of the head with the thinning scissors, using the thinning scissors over comb technique, just to remove 20% of the weight and thickness, making it easier to blend when we're working with the clipper. I'm now sectioning off rows 1, 2 and 3, and I'm doing that by just separating the fringe from the sides. I don't need to create a full horseshoe section. I can just remove the fringe and the first 5–10% of the hair on the top from the sides, and that'll be enough to protect the overall shape and style before we start with the clipper. I'm starting with a 2 guard, the lever is closed, and I'm going to create the blend zone. And the blend zone is the area that connects the side to the top of the head. I believe that the blend zone is the most important part of the fade, because this is what controls the overall shape. If you take the blend zone too high, you can spoil the overall shape of the haircut. The shape and angle of this blend zone can make an average haircut look good or a good haircut look bad. So it's important we get this right. So what I'm doing first is, with using this 2 guard, I'm removing the bulk and I'm setting that shape and being careful not to take that guard too high. And I'm creating a slight weighted ridge that I can focus on blending in later on. It's better to remove less than to remove too much. You can always go back to take a bit more off afterwards if you feel like you've not cut it short enough. But if you get too excited at the start and remove too much, then it's too late. So watch as I'm lifting the clipper through and away from the head at the back, creating a blend. And as you can see, I'm not going too high with that guard. I'm pulling away as I'm passing the occipital bone and creating a nice square layer at the back of the head. I'm now moving on to the fade zone. Now the fade zone is the central part of the skin fade, and I'm using a 0.5 grade. So on a JRL clipper, that's 2 notches down. And I'm going to use the corner of the clipper to draw in that arch to set the shape for the drop fade. This is a little bit different than normal skin fades. You have to create a prominent arch to really allow that drop fade to stand out. And we don't want to take this arch too high, because then it'll compromise the blend and the shape. So you've really got to get that central point and be really careful with the shape we're creating to make the drop fade effective. I'm then rounding it at the back, still keeping it below the occipital bone and making sure that it connects evenly to the opposite side. So as you see the drop line I've created on this side with the half, you'll need to do the same on the opposite side, and then I like to connect them up at the back at the end. I'm now working through the line with a flat blade against the surface rather than using the corner to draw the line in. And what I'm doing is working up through the line and flicking out slightly to create a tapered edge rather than a blunt edge, and this will allow me then to blend it into the blend zone more easily. Make sure you repeat this process throughout the back and on the opposite side. Now that the fade zone is complete, you can see the 3 zones there: blend zone, fade zone and skin zone. I'm now moving on to the skin zone and removing the remaining bit of hair within that zone. I'm still going to draw the line in with the corner of the blade just to help me have more control over creating that shape and to stop me from accidentally taking the line too high. So I'm going to create a line on the outside of that skin zone. That would be my limit with the trimmer or the detailer. I won't be able to take it any higher than this line, and then I can remove all the hair below this line. Once this skin zone is in place and I've removed all the hair, I can then work on blending these lines out. Make sure to repeat this on the opposite side. So let's go over the zones again. We have the blend zone that we created with a 2 guard, the fade zone that we created with a 0.5, and the skin zone that we created with a trimmer. And these zones control the shape and effect of the fade. We now need to connect these zones together. So I'm going to do that by grading down through the guards, using the grades needed in between the grades used to create the lines. So in between the 2 and the 0.5, we're going to start with an open 1, so a 1.5, and we're going to work down through the blend zone into the fade zone, fading out that line, working down from a 1.5 all the way down then to a 0.5 until this zone connects. Now with this 1.5, I'm not flicking through as high as I did with a 2. I don't want to compromise the top of the blend zone that I've already created with the 2. So I'm going to work through the line and just flick out before I come to the top of that blend zone, so I connect into the length created with the 2 rather than removing the length with the 1.5, making the whole blend zone a 1.5, and then we defeat the object. We need to work through the grade, stretching from the baseline all the way through to the blend zone, and we need to stretch through using each grade individually, and each grade gives us a different coloured effect, and it's those coloured effects layered evenly and equally spread out throughout the fade is what gives us that faded effect. And if we can do that following the shape of the lines that we've created in the blend zone, fade zone and skin zone, then we get the drop fade effect. So now that we've done the 1.5, we're closing it to a 1, and we're going to do the same again. But each time we're going to flick it a little bit lower. We're still going to start on that line that was created on the top of the fade zone and the bottom of the blend zone. That's our starting point. And we're going to work through that and flick out as we're working up into each zone. But with each grade, we're going to keep each flick a little bit lower. So obviously with the blend zone and the 2 that we started with, we took it right up to rows 4 and 5 at the top of the side profile of the head. With the 1.5, we flicked it out a little bit lower, and now with the 1, we're flicking out a little bit lower again. And we're going to do that each time until we finally blend out that line at the bottom of the blend zone. And we need to make sure that we repeat this process on both sides. I like to start on one side. Once I'm happy with what I've done on the first side, I move over to the opposite side and do the same, and then I'll do the back and connect them together. But for tutorial purposes, I'll just be showing the side and the back. And the technique we want to be using is the flicking out C motion. So we go in with the teeth first, come through the line and lift away in a C motion, creating a tapered finish. It is important to be thorough and consistent. It does take a bit of patience, but it's always worth it. And if you do happen to find some dark spots as you go because of some dips in the head, use the corner of the clipper of that guard to get in and scratch those dark spots out. Once we're happy with the work that we've done with the 1 guard, we can move on to the 0.5 guard. Now we need to use this guard a little bit differently. It's not the same as using an open lever. The guard itself creates a softer edge to the blade, giving us a little bit more length. It doesn't quite cut the hair as short, and to use this guard effectively, I like to angle the clipper up horizontally and then flick the blade up vertically, connecting the fade zone and the blend zone together as if you were plastering, like creating a very parallel skimming motion to create a flat blended finish, and this then connects both zones. If you do find some darker spots, use the corner of the blade to scratch into them and poke them out. You need to make sure you're going against the grain vertically. You don't want to be coming across the grain of the hair horizontally, because then you'll create more lines. So you're going to be poking the blade into the dark spots, going against the direction of hair growth, and this will polish these lines out. But as you can see already, just by using that vertical flicking motion with the 0.5 guard on the clipper, the fade is already started to come together. Now on the back of the head, you can see I'm using the same technique again. The clipper is held up horizontally, and I'm rubbing through the line from the top of the fade zone and the bottom of the blend zone, and skimming into the blend zone, keeping the blade parallel to the head, using a vertical motion. But because the back of the head has a lot more dips and different shapes, we do have to be more thorough, more consistent, and use a lot more of the corner to break up these dark spots and to dig out the thicker bits of hair within the dips at the back of the head. The back is a lot harder than the sides. It takes a lot more patience and perseverance using the corner a lot of the time to get all those dark spots out and to allow the fade to look blurry and effective. So be patient, but trust the process, using that 0.5 guard to do all the hard work, and watch how your masterpiece comes together. If you feel like you need to go higher up the zones and further into the blend zone, but are worried about removing too much hair, open the lever of your clipper. Even if it's just 2 notches down, so it's roughly a 0.75, and that way then you won't remove as much hair. Just keep working the tips of the blade and the corner of the blade into those dark spots, and they will fade out. Now that the fade zone and the blend zone are connected, we need to connect the skin zone to the fade zone. That line was created with a trimmer, so we'll be doing the same thing, but with an exposed blade with no guard, opening the lever to start, and this gives us about a 0.3. It's shorter than the GRL blade, even though it's open with 2 notches, just like the GRL was when we created the fade zone. But because this is a gamma blade, I'm using a gamma clipper, this blade is 0 gapped and allows us to get closer to the scalp than the GRL clipper. The GRL blade was a tapered blade, and that's great for getting through bulk, but I find with the gamma clipper, the fade blade, which is flatter, gets us that little bit closer, making it easier to scratch out any skin lines. I'm being really careful coming through this line, mainly using the corner, just to start breaking that line up. And even with the lever down 2 notches, a lot of that line has started to come out. Now I've fully opened the lever, just to refine the rest of the fade. I'm going to use that corner just to break up any fine dark spots, just to refine it that little bit more, being a little bit OCD, but sometimes spending that bit of extra time can really make a big difference in the fade and can take a haircut from a good haircut to a great haircut. Now we have fully closed the lever, and I can go back to refining that skin line at the top of the skin zone that connects to the fade zone, just working the corner into that line to break it up, connecting the zones together. By predominantly using the corner, we are much less likely to create more lines. That corner will just poke through the line that's there, removing it and blend it into the direction of hair growth above. As long as we're working vertically, the zones will blend. If we start coming across horizontally, then there's a very good chance we will create more lines. But if we come through with a full flat blade against the scalp and lift it through too high, then we will compromise everything that we've done above. So by using the corner and the tips of the blade, we can just nibble through that line, removing it without compromising the zone above. Make sure to repeat this process all the way around the head. that the fade has been completed on both sides, I'm moving on to the shape up, and I'm working through my concave out towards the temple point with the Barberless Pro, using the corner first to control the shape. I'm trying to follow the natural outline as close as I can. I don't want to shave too far into the fade or into the scalp, because this isn't good practice and the hair won't grow back very well and will ruin the haircut within a couple of days as the stubble starts to grow back. So try and keep that outline as close as you can to the natural shape of the temple, but obviously working into it just enough to make that line look sharp. Here I'm using trimmer over comb just to remove the edges from the thicker section in the temple. We want to keep the section as dark as possible to give it that drop fade effect, but we don't want it to be too thick where there's longer strands of hair compromising the shape up or the fade. So that trimmer over comb was just a little bit of refining to make sure the hair is sitting smooth to the head. And now I'm refining with the corner of the trimmer, breaking back into the fade, just taking out any notches or dark spots that I'm not happy with, making that fade as perfect as I possibly can. Now we're working on to the Andis foils. I can use the corner of this foil to sharpen up the shape up in the concave. This will remove any little dots of stubble that's been left behind from the trimmer. And then I'm going to work down through the fade zone into the skin zone, moving consistently downwards, lifting the blade away from the head and then working down again. Be careful not to push the blade into the scalp or up into the fade zone, as you will create bald spots and the zones won't connect very nicely. So you've got to be careful to only work down to connect them together, and then dab the foil blade at the baseline of the skin zone, taking it down to skin, but being careful not to take it too high to compromise the zones above or to remove any stubble from the trimmer. It's important that we have each step in place. So the foil creates the skin outline right on the baseline. The trimmer creates a minor bit of stubble. The zero then creates a little bit longer stubble, and that gradually works up through the grades and the guards, creating a darker shade, and this is what gives you the faded effect. But we have to make sure that every grade is in place to get that even blur of color contrast from bottom to top. I'm now removing the clip and releasing the fringe, combing the hair through to see it sit in its natural position, and whatever's hanging over into the blend zone from rows 4 or 5, I'm just going to refine those edges with a bit of scissors over comb, and I'm using the point cutting method with the scissors to refine the fade and the outline of the shape up. And this is just some tweaking. A lot of barbers or customers probably wouldn't even notice the difference, but I notice, and I like to make sure that everything is perfect. So this is just refining again, scissor over comb, angling the comb accurately to control the shape of the blend zone as it connects to the weight above, and then refining the concave area of the shape up, refining that darker outline that creates that drop fade effect in that concave. Now I'm point cutting into the blend zone to create some extra texture and refining the last few edges of the blend zone that connects to rows 4 and 5. I am focusing a little bit more on the blend zone from the ears back, so working more consistently throughout the back of the head, creating a more even blend. But if you look at the section in front of the ears, where the blend zone connects to the top, that section sits a bit heavier, and I've done that on purpose. I've left that weight heavier in that blend zone to create a more textured finish that flows through into the fringe. And just for some final refining, before we move on to the styling, I've brought up the thinning scissors again, and you can use the tips of the thinning scissors to refine any dark spots in the fade if there's any left, for a bit of extra tweaking. And you can also do the same throughout the blend, just skimming through, making sure not to pull as you cut, just to nibble through the edges of the blend, just taking out any blunt spots that you might want to soften. And now the cut is complete. I'm applying Fresh Head's Urban Mist Salt Spray quite generously to the top, because I want to prime the hair thoroughly and give it plenty of volume and lift before applying the final styling product. I'm now blast drying the hair into position. So we have the airflow on full and the heat is on medium. I don't like to put the heat on full if I can help it, because I just don't want to risk burning or making it uncomfortable for the customer. So I like to do medium heat but high flow. And I'm just blasting the air, controlling the hair into the direction that we want it to sit for the style. I'm blowing upwards through the crown to get the back of the head to sit up and volumized. I'm blowing the blend flat and forward towards the fringe, and I'm starting to push the root to the top of the head up, creating volume and texture. And I'm making sure to only use my hands and fingers to maximize that textured finish in the hair. If we try using combs or brushes, it could smooth the hair out too much, flattening the hair and taking away that natural rugged look that I'm going for. I want to create a lift in the fringe, so I'm going to control the shape of the fringe with my hands and blast dry the fringe up, creating more volume throughout the fringe. And then I'm going to use my hands to tweak it into position, manipulating the hair to hold a certain shape. And we're doing this to raise it slightly off the forehead and just giving it that lifted, curved finish and creative feature at the front. I'm now going to finish the hair with the Crazy Bull Space Dust Texturizing powder. I really like this powder. It doesn't leave the hair with a dry, dusty looking finish. It actually gives it a slight sheen and a little bit of moisture, but still gives it plenty of hold and an effective matte finish, but without it looking white and dusty. And I'm applying this to the hair evenly throughout, working it into the root through to the tips, allowing me to control the whole shape of the hair from root to tip. Once the product has been applied evenly, it just comes down to patience and tweaking. And our focus just needs to be on getting the right shape throughout the hair, creating volume from back to front, creating a square box profile throughout the top with an edge at the back and an edge at the front. Once we've created the finished shape, it just comes down to tweaking and refining with the fingertips and just twisting and manipulating little sections of hair into the final position, giving it its effective finish. It does take patience. It's not going to fall into place immediately. These sorts of finishes do take time and perseverance, but it'll be well worth it in the end. If the hair has been cut into shape correctly, it will hold its shape and be easier to style. It's just the refining and the finishing touches that take that bit of extra patience and perseverance. But if the customer was to reproduce this at home, it's a practical style for the customer to be able to replicate. It's not going to be something that they are not going to be able to reproduce. But for tutorial and photographic purposes, the extra tweaking and refining makes a massive difference for the overall look. I like to use a cross fingers technique to create that basket weave looking texture on top, where I'll cross two of my fingers over each other and then pull the hair through the fingers, crossing the hair over, creating that crossover textured finish. I'm now just adding the finishing touches, little tweaks and twists here and there to complete the overall look of the haircut. So I hope this has helped. I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope you like the finished look that can be seen in the image on the screen. This is the image that I've used for social media. Keep your eyes peeled for tutorials on the Barber Coach TV for effective social media marketing and how to get the best out of your social media accounts, as well as tutorials on how to take the best pictures for social media and how to edit them effectively. Thank you very much for watching.